Everybody, it's Emily at Arc Schooling, and today we're going to talk about what I read the second half of December. So I think I left off with reading The Misfits. This was A Royal Conundrum by Lisa Yee, and this was the last book I read for the Sibbles Awards. And I read this super fast over like the course of a day because I was out of time and I really needed to read it. And this is a story that I would compare to The Mysterious Benedict Society by Trenton Stewart, I think is his name. And this felt very similar, where you're following a group of children who are accepted into this special school for like really smart kids, and they're trained to be like spies and that sort of thing. Like, it almost feels like assassin school, but they're not actually assassins, but they're like trained in spycraft and that sort of thing. And it's a really like diverse and interesting cast of characters, and the writing is really funny and witty, and I found it to be a really interesting story. I kind of want to read it again, but like slower this time, because I had like very little time to get it finished. But like I feel like I want to go back and read it again just a smidge slower so I can really digest everything that happened, because this is like one of those action-packed, like something's happening every minute kind of stories, and I think kids will love it because it is so fun and so full of like wacky spy stuff and action. And they have all these different like gadgets and things, and I don't know, I just found it really fun. I think I gave it, see, I don't have my ratings because I ran out of space in my bullet journal where I keep my reading log, and that's where I keep my ratings. So I think I gave this either 4 or 5 stars, but I don't remember. Then I read The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This was the last 12 recommendations from 12 friends that I needed to read. And I'm so glad that I did it as a reread instead of moving on to book 2 like I'd planned originally, because I read this first, I think like 2 years ago, and didn't like it. I felt like I didn't understand what was happening, and I had to like force myself to finish it because it was a book club read, and I really didn't feel like I understood it. And so I'm really glad that you gave me the opportunity to read it a second time, because I don't know that I would have ever picked it up again, honestly. I kind of had written it off as like not for me, and it ended up being an absolute favorite for me, and I'm so glad that I was able to do that, because this is a book that I just felt stupid that I read it the first time. But getting to read it a second time, everything kind of clicked into place where it didn't the first time. So this is a book about like this world which has this like cataclysmic weather and like earthquakes and eruptions and all these things that like completely like reshape the earth every so many years. And those are called fifth seasons. And we're following characters who are these like people who have the ability to control the earth. And we get to see like how they're being used by the society and how they're viewed by society as almost like this weird other, and people don't always like or trust them, but they're the ones keeping it together, kind of. And it was just a really interesting story, and I don't really know how to talk about it, but like I really enjoyed it, and I think I might even read the next book and continue it. And I gave that 5 stars. Then I read Candy Cane Kills by Brian McCauley, and this was my last buzzword reading challenge book, because I needed something with holiday word in the title. And I thought candy worked for that. And it is a holiday themed story. This is so much better than I expected it to be. I thought this was going to be so cheesy and dumb, and I was just going to like get through it so I could count it toward my challenge. But I ended up really enjoying this book. This is a story, and it's really short too, so I don't know how to talk about it without spoiling anything. This is a story about family who goes to rent a cabin, or like a house, like an Airbnb situation, and they're in this like small town where they've rented it, and they find out that one, they're the first people to have ever rented this house, and two, there was a murder here, and the murder was a girl murdering her whole family on Christmas. And so I'm going to leave it at that as like my setup. But the characters were all really interesting, like individual people. Like sometimes with slashers, you really don't get to know anybody. And we did have a few characters that we really didn't know that well, that were just there for like getting killed. But for the most part, I felt like you actually did get some character development and like time to care about these people before things started happening. So I thought this was a really interesting story. There's a sequel I'm considering reading. Maybe I'll actually do that. I don't know. But I really liked it. So I gave this 4.5 stars. Then I read Once Upon a Time, I Lived on Mars, and this is by Kate Green. And I read this because it fit the two Build Your Library reading challenges I had left. I needed to read a book with time in the title, and I needed to read something about the space race. And like, I didn't like any of the options I had on my shelves for either of those things. So I'm like, great, what do I do? Do I force myself to read something I do not want to read, or do I look for something else available? And I found this as an audiobook and decided it was worth listening to because it hit both of those prompts and it was short. I think this was like a 6-hour audio, and because I listened at like 2.5 speed, I got through this in like 3 hours. And I thought it was fine. Like, this was nothing revolutionary. It's about the author's experience working with this project that NASA put together where they wanted to simulate life on Mars and see if it's even something that would work. Like, how would we do this? So they were living in this like sealed off, like kind of think biodome situation in Hawaii, where they lived there for a set amount of time, and they had to like journal everything, like write about their experiences and track everything that happens, and they had jobs that they had to do. So like they were simulating life on a Mars colony. And she does talk a lot about that in the story, but it's not like just about that. She talks a lot about other things too. Like, she talks a lot about women in STEM, specifically women in astronaut positions. Like, being able to go to space as a woman was something that like they knew women would be better suited for it, but they couldn't like let women be the ones to do it first. And so she talks a lot about that. She talks a lot about her family and her life experiences and things like that. So I thought it was an interesting book overall. I liked reading about her experiences, and I gave this like 3 3/4 stars. I read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, and I loved this. This was like so interesting to read. Okay, so I have been like on the fence calling R.F. Kuang a favorite author because I'd really only read the first Poppy War book and Babel. And while I loved both of those things, obviously I didn't finish the Poppy War series, and I'd had Yellowface sitting on my shelf for like 2 years before I finally picked it up. But I absolutely adore Babel. Like, I've read Babel twice. I think it was even better the second time. It's one of my favorite books of all time. So like, I really wanted to read Yellowface and see if I could just finally qualify R.F. Kuang as a favorite author. And I can now say that she is in fact my favorite author. This is such a weird story. I describe it as like if book Twitter drama spawned a child and that child was a book. It would be Yellowface. This was exactly like if you've ever found yourself scrolling through threads or Twitter trying to find out like why this beef between two authors is happening, or like whatever the book drama of the moment is. If you've ever found yourself trying to read up on that, you would like this book because this book is exactly what that. We're following Juniper, and she is the worst person alive. Like, I hated her so much. She is an awful person. And like, I would say that she is up there for me with like Quentin Coldwater and Cersei Lannister as awful protagonists that you have to be stuck with for a certain amount of time. And Juniper is friends with Athena Liu, who is an author of Asian descent. Juniper does not really know what Asian descent that is, so she calls her Chinese a lot in the book. I think we do find out she's actually Korean. I don't know, something like that, but like Juniper doesn't know, and so we're stuck with Juniper and what she knows. And Juniper knows very little and is an absolute horrendous human and super racist and just very much that white book person who thinks they know more than you about your heritage. That's kind of what this was. And but I still like could not stop reading this. I read the whole book in 2 sittings because I like couldn't stop. I needed to know where the heck this was going to go. And it just like gets worse and worse over the course of the story. Like the absolute nonsense happening. The basic gist of the book is that Juniper was there when Athena died and was able to get her hands on her manuscript that she was working on. And she steals this manuscript, reads it, and realizes that this is amazing. Maybe she should publish it. And like she changes her pen name so that it sounds a little bit more ambiguously Asian. And she's just like the wrong person to be telling the story, and like people are calling her out on it, and she is shutting it down left and right, and it just gets worse and worse over the course of the book. And yeah, it was a good time. I gave this like 4.5 stars. I maybe a 5-star. I haven't decided yet, but I really liked it. I had a good time with it. It was a lot to read, but I'm glad I finally read it. And then the last book I read in December was Against the Darkness by Kendar Blake. This is the 3rd and final book in the In Every Generation trilogy, and I loved this. This was a 5-star for me. I'm so obsessed with this trilogy, and I really want it to be adapted. I feel like it would be amazing. This is a continuation of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and we're following Willow's daughter Frankie, who has been called to be a Slayer. And I've talked a lot about this series before, but like you guys, if you are a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, what are you doing? Pick up the series. You are going to love it. This is like the same characters you know and love, but also some new characters that they've added in, like the new generation of Scoobies. Oh my gosh, you guys, it's so good. Like, I loved it. Kendar Blake does a great job capturing like these characters and like gives them the language that you would expect to hear from them, like their essence. She does a really good job with Buffy speak. It feels authentic to the show. I can tell Kendar Blake is a big Buffy fan, and I am so glad that she gifted us this trilogy. I want another trilogy now. I want more. Bring me more. That is everything I read in the second half of December. It was a pretty good reading month. I think if I had to pick a favorite from this, it would probably be the 5th season, closely followed by Yellowface and Against the Darkness. Like, those are my top 3 of the second half of the month. If I'm talking about the month as a whole, I think I would still stick with that. Those are like my 3 favorites of December. So let me know down in the comments, what was your favorite read in December? I would love to know. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Happy reading. Bye.